Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we have a story written by yours truly. A story which asks the question, to what lengths would you go to find your way home? So sit back, relax, and enjoy. There's No Place Like Home by Beaman. The wind howls and the earth moves, and the knocking continues as the old wooden walls around me creak under the weight of the night. The sun has long set and the hour is bleak. A cold and harsh blanket of fog clouds the windows as it blackens at the light. Outside, trees rock violently as Mother Nature loudly announces her presence with a thunderous roar. The foundations of my life sway as the knocking continues with a feverish repetition. Outside, there is nothing but chaos, brought forward into my life and personified simply by the continuous banging echoing loudly at my door. With shaking hands, I approach.
Who is it? Please, tell me. Who is there?
For a moment, it is only the air that I can hear, its vicious veracity whistling loudly as it exposes the cracks within my castle. It screams loudly before finally settling for a moment, just in time to give the windswept stage to the stranger just outside of my door. Please, for the love of God, let me in. There has been an accident just down the road. I think that I have a concussion. Panic. Almost instantly, the nasty feeling is upon me, moving throughout my body with a disturbing haste. It quickens the heart as it energizes the blood, soaking my interior in a cold blackness that seeps unrestricted throughout my small, petite frame. Please, I think that I'm bleeding. The whistling sound all around of me seems to increase in intensity, and the floor moves uncomfortably below me. The hour is long past its safety, and I am so very far from anything that can be considered civil. My home was remote. My home was secluded. My home sat on top of a beautiful hill, one of which overlooked the town just a little down the ways. On a clear day, you could see for miles. On a clear day, you could see everything. Every little building, every achievement of man, every proud little monument laid bare and humble within the valley below. You could see the one road, the one winding path, the one piece of dirt that weaved with a spasm up the hill, through the tall trees, and beneath their shadow, leading its way up to my hill, and up to my home. You could see the distance, and you could see the emptiness. And it was this emptiness which forced its weight upon me, immobilizing me with the indecision as it encumbered my soul.
Think. Just think.
Again, the knocking was there. I was not prepared for this. The point of the seclusion was to remain secluded. This sudden intrusion was not comfortable. This intrusion was not planned. Throughout my entire life and within everything I had ever done, I had always liked to be prepared. I was meticulous. I was a creature of knowledge, and more importantly, I was a creature of habit. I liked to plan. Surprises had never been my forte, but unfortunately for me, one had come knocking for me regardless. My hand shook again as it unconsciously moved towards the door.
You can handle this. Are you hurt?
His frustration was heavy and noticeable, even against the backdrop of the night. Lady, what do you think is going on here? Let me in. I can barely stand.
It is almost too perfect.
The location of my home, the seclusion, the emptiness, the hour, and the darkness. It was almost too perfect. I remember the day that I had chosen it, or more aptly, it had chosen me. I had been claimed by the pure serenity of its hills. I had been knocked back and taken in by the quiet, by the solitude, by the nothingness of it all. The vast space around of the building had whispered to me. It had greeted me, and it had insisted that these walls would be mine. It was the epitome of segregation, the kind of which is rarely afforded to those within my line of work. It had been perfect, and it had been meant, but this visit had reconstructed my view. Tonight, my home had become something entirely different. It had become a vessel, a means to expose me, to leave me weak, and to leave me open. Tonight, it had become a prison, and the notion of such a thing caused my being to shiver. Slowly, my hand moved forward.
Are you alone?
Even through the wooden door, I could tell that his patience was running thin. For Christ's sake, lady, have you not heard a single word that I have said? I think that I have a bloody head injury. Let me in, now! Outside, the torrential wisp of wind against the trees continued to howl loudly. Inside, my mind raced and my heart thumped violently.
You have to make a choice.
Already, within my head, 1,000 outcomes were being considered. I turned the handle slightly and prepared to open the way inside.
Just be careful.
Almost instantly, the howling wind breached the interior of my home. The door swung open a little more forcefully than I had anticipated, and the gentleman hurried inside, turning only briefly to close the way behind of him. Once the door had been shut, he paused for a moment and brought his hand to his head before moving it down to survey the extent of his injury. Content that he could continue on living for a moment longer, he turned and slowly exhaled a heavy relief.
Words. Any words. Just speak. Do you want a drink or anything?
The question caught him off guard. He paused for a second, allowing the ridiculous proposition to wash over him before shaking his head in disbelief. You really haven't been listening, have you? Little did he know I had been listening, and everything he had said so far was just a little too easy. I had seen it. After all, how could I not? It had been all over the news for weeks. The chameleon, or at least that is what the people on the news had been calling him. The chameleon was a murderer, and an active one at that. So far, according to the reports, he had claimed at least 10 victims, and the nature surrounding their deaths was a little too familiar for comfort. They had all lived in remote locations, and they all had lived alone, and they had all, according to the evidence, allowed the killer into their home, as there was never any signs of forced entry. Once he had done the deed, it appears that he lingered for a while. There were clear signs that he remained within their homes, assuming their lives, in one instance, for almost a week. He would sustain himself on their cupboards and refresh his body within their beds. He would wear their clothes, and he would take from them even after death, taking their life and living the time which should have been theirs. He would blend and he would inhabit, hence the name. It was difficult to ignore, considering the coverage, and even harder to forget, as the circumstances of the night welcomed the stranger into my home. Jeez, you need to relax, lady. If I wanted to kill you, you would already be dead. He allowed a sick smile to form as the tasteless joke hung heavily around of us.
That's not funny.
He scoffed slightly at the comments. Relax, will you? It's not as if your head was just smashed against the steering wheel, is it? Slowly, he moved past me and sunk down uninvited into my sofa. After a few seconds, he laughed as he once again spoke. Oh, a little scared of the chameleon, are we?
This doesn't feel right.
Again, the nasty smile moved across his features and hung for a second as he anticipated an answer. With only my silence for a response, he once again shook his head. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I can see why you would worry. I mean, look at all of this. He gestured around my home. All alone tonight, are we? Up on this hill, completely cut off from all of those around of you. I mean, God, even this storm, it really does set the mood, doesn't it? I bet you heard me at your door, you thought your number was up, right? I bet you thought your name would be all on the news next, immortalised for a single act of violence. I bet you thought the worst. A cold shiver moved noticeably through me. I mean, I could be anyone, right? Who's to say? Maybe I am your end. The shiver grew into a cold dread as it spread throughout my body. My brain buzzed and the wind continued to howl loudly as my thoughts raced. My name would never be on the news. Every single report I had seen, every single act retold with a horrid precision. I always knew that their fate would never be mine. I would never allow my name to be spoken by their mouths. I was too clever after all. I never took risks, and I was always so careful in everything that I done. Within my life, nothing was left to chance. Every decision and every choice was always meticulously planned. And that is what made me feel comfortable. That is what made me feel safe. But his appearance tonight, well, that had caused my usually calm demeanour to work in overdrive. Now, with him here, the chaos which had once existed only outside of these walls had somehow made its way inside, and now it was here, threatening to do the unthinkable while smiling up at me from the comfort of my own sofa.
He should not be here.
My mind raced as I struggled to formulate a response to his odd question. After a few moments, the answer came, and before I knew it, I was speaking.
Well, let's try and not let you end me before we get you some help.
He smiled a coy smile and nodded his head. Now that sounds like a plan.
A plan, that is what I need.
Again, my thoughts swirled as I watched him rise from the sofa. This man had entered my home in the dead of night to the vicious serenade of a storm. No matter his words and no matter his truth, I did not trust him. I mean, how could I? He was a stranger, an unexpected occurrence, a variable which could not be planned for, and as the thought sat with me, the uncomfortable feeling only grew stronger throughout my core. This man, this stranger, he had wandered here, arriving unannounced, with no more than the clothes on his back and a story on his lips. Whatever truth he intended to convey, it was not mine and never would be. I needed time to think. I needed time to plan. I'm just going to use your phone. A nasty fizzle of adrenaline moved through me.
Oh, the phone.
He was going to call someone. He was going to bring someone else here. It was just me. I would not be able to handle the situation with another individual brought into the mix. And realistically, I had no way of knowing exactly who he would call. My heart began to race as he picked up the receiver and began to dial.
Think. Do something. This doesn't feel right.
After a few moments, he began to speak. "Yeah, it's me," he started. Look, stop. Listen, I need you to come out here and get me. This bloody storm caused me to run off the road. No. Look, I'm fine. Just get out here. Wait, what, 1 second. Slowly, he turned to me. Where are we exactly? Without a fault, it was there. So perfect in its simplicity, but effective nonetheless. I knew exactly how to buy myself some time.
Just south of Newton, there's only one road that moves up the hill. You can't miss it.
He smiled and turned back to the phone and began to repeat my lie. Yes, did you get that? South, take the one road. I'm in the only house on top of the hill. Oh, okay, see you soon. He set the receiver back down and turned, sinking once again into the comforts of my sofa. Well, he smirked. I guess it's just you and me for a little while longer. Nah, don't worry, this won't take long. My heart steadied and calmed as I watched him once again reach up to his head. What a night, huh? He was talking, but I was not listening. Whatever he expected to come of this situation, whatever his plan, I knew that I could not allow it. It was a feeling within me, a cold realization that had been there ever since he had first announced his intent with a knock at my door. There was something about him, the way that he spoke and the things that he had said, all of it. It did not sit well with me. It was counterproductive to my life and it threatened my existence. A cold sweat moved over me as I mentally planned my next steps. Suddenly, the kitchen came to mind.
So, how about that drink?
He thought for a second before answering. You know what? Yeah, I think I could do with one. Do you have anything strong? I forced to smile at the question.
I'm sure I could find something.
He nodded in agreement and I moved past him and into the kitchen. Almost without any discernible fault, I began to prepare his drink. My mind was already lost by the sight of the trees moving just outside of my kitchen window. They swayed forcefully within the darkness, their long arms stretching tall out into the blackness of the sky above, almost signalling, calling for help, trying their best to alert the world to the terribleness which sat on top of the hill. Unfortunately, within the cold inkiness of the night, nobody was listening and nobody would be coming to help. A dark anxiety began to build as I picked up the two glasses and moved back into the living room. I set his drink down in front of him and took a seat in the chair opposite, trying to steady my shaking hands as I brought it to my lips. He leant forward, retrieved the glass, and took a swig from the contents. "Ah, that's it," he smiled. "That is so much better." I did not answer him, but instead I continued to watch him as he once again brought the glass to his lips. So, how long have you lived here? My hands were still shaking as I willed my lips to respond.
Almost a week now.
He once again laughed, the tone of his amusement bellowing loudly throughout the tiny room. A week? Jesus! I bet me showing up as I did really spooked you then, huh? I let the question hang in the air as the window frames of my home rattled under the strain of the storm outside. After a few seconds, he got up and began to survey my home as he took another gulp at his drink. Do you not feel trapped? I mean, being out here by yourself? If it was me, out here, all alone, especially considering the type of individual that could be out here too, I think that I would be a mess. A wreck even. I mean, this darkness, every single night, it's a lot to deal with, especially alone. Are you not afraid? Are you not worried? I mean, hell, how can you even sleep out here all by yourself? I allowed his question to wash over me.
He has a point.
Before tonight, I had always felt comfortable. After all, it was the solitude of the hill which had brought me here. This house was perfect. It had an indescribable charm to it, a feel that had been untested by the touch of time. It was unbreakable, and it was everlasting. It was serene, and it was picturesque, and if truth were to be told, I had always valued privacy, and this location, this home, it had the commodity in abundance. But tonight, he had a point. His presence had altered the narrative of my home. Suddenly, the walls were no longer comforting, but foreboding and tight. One wrong move, and they would be my forever. One wrong move, and they would become a catalyst, leading me to a prison of eternity. Slowly, I brought the glass to my lips and allowed the drink into me.
I used to enjoy it.
I answered.
The peacefulness of it all, I guess. I never really thought about the possibility of someone else showing up here. You made me rethink my choices. I definitely will have to be more mindful moving forward.
He nodded in agreement as he moved towards the picture frames on my mantel. You do, he began, reaching out to retrieve one of the frames. You really do. Time slowed as he paused with the frame in hand. He stood stationary for a second as the image moved through him. With a spasm, his eyes flickered over the other frames on display before settling back on the one within his hand. From the vantage point of my chair, I could almost see the question on his lips. It was clear and it was obvious, but his brain struggled to comprehend it. I could see him thinking wondering whether to ask it or whether to let it go. After a few moments of struggle, he turned to me and his mouth moved. Who's this man in all of the pictures? Calmly, I took a final sip of my drink and set it back down on the table before turning back to him with a smile.
He was the previous owner. He was nice. He understood how life is meant to be lived. I mean, look around at his home. He knew that life was not out there. Out there, within the sea of creatures we insist on calling human beings. Real life is the reality that we choose to make. The homes that we choose to occupy, they are our castles and our havens. Their walls, they keep us protected and hidden from the evil which is washing uncontrolled across this filthy and decayed world. We can be whoever we want within these walls. That's how I like to live my life.
His body began to noticeably shake as he stood across from me.
Do you not agree? It's fine if you don't. I mean, you don't have to agree with me, but you will agree with him when you meet him. He's outside in the shed. He's been rather quiet for almost a week now, but who could blame him? His skull is a little lacking in fortitude these days. Probably due to how I smashed it open over and over again and again until he no longer moved.
It was all over him, the horrid realization of it all. The glass fell from his hand and shattered against the floor in a perfect display as the white, frothy substance moved unrestricted from his lips. In a second, he was down, writhing around on the floor with a painfully clear agony as he sucked at each elusive breath. His legs extended and retracted several times as he brought his hand up to his throat, desperately attempting to somehow alleviate the clearly distressing pain coursing throughout his airways. As the seconds passed, the white frothy substance leaking from his lips became tinged with red as his insides burnt against the inclusion of the corrosion that I had introduced into him through the drink. I allowed the sight to wash over me, and as I watched his final moments, I could not help but allow a tight smile to move across my features. I began, moving to cradle him.
I never really liked the name. The chameleon, I mean. Hardly inventive, right?
His eyes widened as I moved in, a mess of confusion and desperation perfectly captured within his final moments.
It's okay, it's almost over. You can relax. You are home. And if there is anything that I have come to appreciate within this life, it's the fact that there is no place like home.
Once again, that was There's No Place Like Home, written by me. If you liked the story, please do consider leaving a comment just to tell me that you liked it, or if you didn't like it, please do, leave a comment. Tell me you didn't like it. And don't forget to like, and if you'd like to hear more, subscribe. But thanks for listening, guys. But until the next video, remember, there is more than shadow beyond the light.